Hello, everybody. Hello. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to After Dark with Moog. I'm Moog. And today we're going to get to some W. Jacobs tonight, so I'm very excited about that. No, tonight we're going to read some W. Jacobs stuff. Okay, so I did pull up about W. Jacobs on Wikipedia. And there is not a lot to say about him. So I'm going to read it anyway. I really need to be more accessible. Okay, so William Wymark Jacobs was an English author of short fiction and drama. He is best known for his short story, The Monkey's Paw. That's all they wrote about him at the top, and then it like divides into like early life, early work, burp burp burp. So I guess we'll just go down to literature. Jacobs is remembered for a macabre tale, The Monkey's Paw, published in 1902 in a short story collection, The Lady of the Barge, and several other ghost stories, including The Toll House, which we did already read, from the 1909 collection, Sailor's Knots, and Jerry Bundler from the 1901 Light Freights. Most of his work was humorous. His favorite subject was marine life. And then this is a quote: "Men who go down to the sea in ships of moderate tonnage," said Punch, reviewing his first collection, Many Cargoes, which gained popular success on publication in 1896. Michael Sadlier has said of Jacobs's fiction, he wrote stories of three kinds, describing the misadventures of sailormen ashore, celebrating the artful dodger of a slow-witted village, and tales of the macabre. So, let's do it. The Monkey's Paw. 1. Without, the night was cold and wet, but in the small parlor of Laburnum Villa, the blinds were drawn and the fire burned brightly. Father and son were at chess. The former, who possessed ideas about the game involving radical changes, putting his king into such sharp and unnecessary perils that it even provoked comment from the white-haired old lady knitting placidly by the fire. "Hark, at the wind," said Mr. White, who, having seen a fatal mistake after it was too late, was amiably desirous of preventing his son from seeing it. "I'm listening," said the latter, grimly surveying the board as he stretched out his hand. "Check." "Hmm, I should hardly think that he'd come tonight," said his father, with his hand poised over the board. "Mate," replied the son. "That's the worst of living so far out," bawled Mr. White, with sudden and unlooked-for violence. "Of all the beastly, slushy, out-of-the-way places to live, this is the worst. Pathway's a bog, and the road's a torrent. I don't know what people are thinking about. I suppose because only 2 houses in the road are let, they think it doesn't matter." "Never mind, dear," said his wife soothingly. "Perhaps you'll win the next one." Mr. White looked up sharply just in time to intercept a knowing glance between mother and son. The words died away on his lips, and he hid a guilty grin in his thin gray beard. "There he is," said Herbert White, as the gate banged to loudly and heavy footsteps came toward the door. The old man rose with hospitable haste, and opening the door, was heard condoling with the new arrival. The new arrival also condoled with himself, so that Mrs. White said, "Tut, tut." and coughed gently as her husband entered the room, followed by a tall, burly man, beady of eye and rubicund of visage. Sergeant Major Morris, he said, introducing him. The sergeant major shook hands, and taking the proffered seat by the fire, watched contentedly while his host got out whiskey and tumblers and stood a small copper kettle on the fire. At the third glass, his eyes got brighter, and he began to talk, the little family circle regarding with eager interest this visitor from distant parts, as he squared his broad shoulders in the chair and spoke of wild scenes and doughty deeds, of wars and plagues and strange peoples. 21 years of it, said Mr. White, nodding at his wife and son. When he went away, he was a slip of a youth in the warehouse. Now look at him. Oh, he don't look to have taken much harm, said Mrs. White politely. I'd like to go to India myself, said the old man, just to look around a bit, you know. Better where you are, said the sergeant general, shaking his head. He put down the empty glass and, sighing softly, shook it again. I should like to see those old temples and fakirs and jugglers, said the old man. What was that you started telling me the other day about a monkey's paw or something, Morris? Nothing, said the soldier hastily. Leastways, nothing worth hearing. Monkey's paw, said Mrs. White, curiously. Well, it's just a bit of what you might call magic, perhaps, said the sergeant major offhandedly. His three listeners leaned forward eagerly. The visitor absent-mindedly put his empty glass to his lips, and then set it down again. His host filled it for him. To look at, said the sergeant major, fumbling in his pocket. It's just an ordinary little paw, dried to a mummy. He took something out of his pocket and proffered it. Mrs. White drew back with a grimace, but her son, taking it, examined it curiously. And what is there special about it? Inquired Mr. White as he took it from his son, and having examined it, placed it upon the table. It had a spell put on it by an old fakir, said the sergeant major, a very holy man. He wanted to show that fate ruled people's lives, and that those who interfered with it did so to their sorrow. He put a spell on it so that 3 separate men could each have 3 wishes from it. His manner was so impressive that his hearers were conscious that their light laughter jarred somewhere. Well, why don't you have 3, sir? Asked Herbert White cleverly. The soldier regarded him in the way that middle age is wont to regard presumptuous youth. I have, he said quietly, and his blotchy face whitened. And did you really have the 3 wishes granted? Asked Mrs. White. I did, said the sergeant major, and his glass tapped against his strong teeth. And has anybody else wished? Persisted the old lady. The first man had his 3 wishes. Yes, was the reply. I don't know what the first 2 were, but the third was for death. That's how I got the paw. His tones were so grave that a hush fell upon the group. If you've had your 3 wishes, it's no good to you now then, Morris, said the old man at last. What do you keep it for? The soldier shook his head. Fancy, I suppose, he said slowly. I did have some idea of selling it, but I don't think I will. It has caused enough mischief already. Besides, people won't buy. They think it's a fairy tale, some of them, and those who do think anything of it want to try it first, and pay me afterward. If you could have another 3 wishes, said the old man, eyeing him keenly, would you have them? I don't know, said the other. I don't know. He took the paw and dangling it between his forefinger and thumb, suddenly threw it upon the fire. White, with a slight cry, stooped down and snatched it off. "Better let it burn," said the soldier solemnly. "If you don't want it, Morris," said the other, "give it to me." "I won't," said his friend doggedly. "I threw it on the fire. If you keep it, don't blame me for what happens. Pitch it in the fire again, like a sensible man." The other shook his head and examined his new possession closely. "How do you do it?" he inquired. "Hold it up to your right hand and wish aloud," said the sergeant major. "But I warn you of the consequences." "Sounds like the Arabian Nights," said Mrs. White as she rose and began to set the supper. "Don't you think you might wish for 4 pairs of hands for me?" Her husband drew the talisman from pocket, and then all three burst into laughter as the sergeant major, with a look of alarm on his face, caught him by the arm. "If you must wish," he said, "wish for something sensible." Mr. White dropped it back into his pocket and, placing chairs, motioned his friend to the table. In the business of supper, the talisman was partly forgotten, and afterward the three sat listening in an enthralled fashion to a second installment of the soldier's adventures in India. "If the tale is about the monkey's paw, is not more truthful than those he has been telling us," said Herbert, as the door closed behind their guest just in time for him to catch the last train. "We shan't make much out of it." "Did you give him anything for it, father?" inquired Mrs. White, regarding her husband closely. "A trifle," said he, coloring slightly. "He didn't want it, but I made him take it, if he pressed me again to throw it away." "Likely," said Herbert with pretended horror. "Why, we're going to be rich, and famous, and happy. Wish to be an emperor, father, to begin with. Then you can't be henpecked." He darted round the table, pursued by the maligned Mrs. White, armed with an odd anti-macassar. Mr. White took the paw from his pocket and eyed it dubiously. "I don't know what to wish for, and that's a fact," he said. "It seems to me I've got all I want." "If you only cleared the house, you'd be quite happy, wouldn't you?" said Herbert, with his hand on his shoulder. "Well, wish for £200 then. That'll just do it." His father, smiling shamefacedly at his own credulity, held up the talisman, as his son, with a solemn face, somewhat marred by a wink at his mother, sat down at the piano and struck a few impressive chords. "I wish for £200, said the old man distinctly. A fine crash from the piano greeted the words, interrupted by a shuddering cry from the old man. His wife and son ran toward him. "It moved!" he cried, with a glance of disgust at the object as it lay on the floor. As I wish, it twisted in my hand like a snake." "Well, I don't see the money," said his son as he picked it up and placed it on the table. "I bet I never shall." "It must have been your fancy, father," said his wife, regarding him anxiously. He shook his head. "Never mind, though. There's no harm done, but it gave me quite a shock all the same." They sat down by the fire again, while the two men finished their pipes. Outside, the wind was higher than ever, and the old man started nervously at the sound of a door banging upstairs. A silence unusual and depressing settled upon all three, which lasted until the old couple rose to retire for the night. "I expect you'll find the cash tied up in a big bag in the middle of your bed," said Herbert, as he bade them good night, "and something horrible squatting up on top of the wardrobe, watching you as you pocket your ill-gotten gains." He sat alone in the darkness, gazing at the dying fire and seeing faces in it. The last face was so horrible and so simian that he gazed at it in amazement. It got so vivid that, with a little uneasy laugh, he felt on the table for a glass containing a little water to throw over it. His hand grasped the monkey's paw, and with a little shiver, he wiped his hand on his coat and went up to bed. End of part 1. I don't know if anything bad's going to happen in this story. 2. In the brightness of the wintry sun next morning, as it streamed over the breakfast table, he laughed at his fears. There was an air of prosaic wholesomeness about the room which it had lacked on the previous night, and the dirty, shriveled little paw was pitched on the sideboard with a carelessness which betokened no great belief in its virtues. "I suppose all old soldiers are the same," said Mrs. White. "The idea of our listening to such nonsense! How could wishes be granted in these days? And if they could, how could £200 hurt you, father?" "Might drop on his head from the sky," said the frivolous Herbert. "Morris said the things happened so naturally," said his father, "that you might, if you so wished, attribute it to coincidence." "Well, don't break into the money before I come back," said Herbert as he rose from the table. "I'm afraid it'll turn you into a mean, avaricious man, and we shall have to disown you." His mother laughed, and following him to the door, watched him down the road, and returning to the breakfast table, was very happy at the expense of her father's credulity, all of which did not prevent her from scurrying to the door at the postman's knock, nor prevent her from referring somewhat shortly to retired sergeant majors of bibulous habits when she found that the post brought a tailor's bill. "Herbert will have some more of his funny remarks, I expect, when he comes home," she said, as they sat at dinner. "I dare say," said Mr. White, pouring himself out some beer. "But for all that, the thing moved in my hand. That I'll swear to." "You thought it did," said the old lady soothingly. "I say it did," replied the other. "There was no thought about it. I had just... What's the matter?" His wife made no reply. She was watching the mysterious movements of a man outside who, peering in an undecided fashion at the house, appeared to be trying to make up his mind to enter. In mental connection with the £200, she noticed that the stranger was well dressed and wore a silk hat of glossy newness. 3 times he paused at the gate and then walked on again. The 4th time he stood with his head up, and then with sudden resolution flung it open and walked up the path. Mrs. White, at the same time, placed her hands behind her, and hurriedly unfastened the strings of her apron, put that useful article of apparel beneath the cushion of her chair. She brought the stranger, who seemed ill at ease, into the room. He gazed at her furtively, and listened in a preoccupied fashion as the old lady apologized for the appearance of the room and her husband's coat, a garment which she usually reserved for the garden. She then waited as patiently as her sex would permit for him to broach his business, but he was at first strangely silent. "I was asked to call," he said at last, and stooped and picked a piece of cotton from his trousers. "I come from Ma and Megan's." The old lady stared. "Is anything the matter?" she asked breathlessly. "Has anything happened to Herbert? What is it? What is it?" Her husband interposed. There, there, mother," he said hastily. "Sit down and don't jump to conclusions. You've not brought bad news, I'm sure, sir." And he eyed the other wistfully. "I'm sorry," began the visitor. "Is he hurt?" demanded the mother wildly. The visitor bowed in assent. badly hurt," he said quietly. "But he is not in any pain." "Oh, thank God," said the old woman, clasping her hands. "Thank God for that. Thank—" She broke off suddenly, as the sinister meaning of the assurance dawned upon her, and she saw the awful confirmation of her fears in the other's averted face. She caught her breath, and turning to her slower-witted husband, laid her trembling hand upon his. There was a long silence. "He was caught in the machinery," said the visitor, at length, at a low voice. "Caught in the machinery," repeated Mr. White in a dazed fashion. "Yes." He sat staring blankly out at the window, and taking his wife's hand between his own, pressed it as he had been wont to do in their old courting days, nearly 40 years before. "He was the only one left to us," he said, turning gently to the visitor. "It is hard." The other coughed and, rising, walked slowly to the window. "The firm wished me to convey their sincere sympathy with you in your great loss," he said, without looking around. "I beg that you will understand I am only their servant and merely obeying orders." There was no reply. The old woman's face was white, her eyes staring, and her breath inaudible. On the husband's face was a look such as his friend and sergeant might have carried into his first action. "I was to say that Ma and Meggins disclaim all responsibility," continued the other. "They admit no liability at all, but in consideration of your son's services, they wish to present you with a certain sum as compensation." Mr. White dropped his wife's hand, and rising to his feet, gazed with a look of horror at his visitor. His dry lips shaped the words. "How much?" £200, was the answer. Unconscious of his wife's shriek, the old man smiled faintly, put out his hand like a sightless man, and dropped, a senseless heap, to the floor. End of part 2. Oh, oh. 3. In the huge new cemetery, some 2 miles distant, the old people buried their dead and came back to a house steeped in shadow and silence. It was all over so quickly that at first they could hardly realize it, and remained in a state of expectation as though of something else to happen. Something else which was to lighten this load, too heavy for old hearts to bear. But the days passed, and expectation gave place to resignation. The hopeless resignation of the old, sometimes miscalled apathy. Sometimes they hardly exchanged a word, for now they had nothing to talk about, and their days were long to weariness. It was about a week after that the old man, waking suddenly in the night, stretched out his hand and found himself alone. The room was in darkness, and the sound of subdued weeping came from the window. He raised himself in bed and listened. "Come back," he said tenderly. "You will be cold." "It is colder for my son," said the old woman, and wept afresh. The sound of her sobs died away on his ears. The bed was warm, and his eyes heavy with sleep. He dozed fitfully, and then slept until a sudden wild cry from his wife awoke him with a start. "The paw!" she cried wildly. "The monkey's paw!" He started up in alarm. Where is it? What's the matter?" She came stumbling across the room towards him. "I want it," she said. "You've not destroyed it?" "It's in the parlor, on the bracket," he replied, marveling. "Why?" she cried, and laughed together, and bending over, kissed his cheek. I only just thought of it, she said hysterically. Why didn't I think of it before? Why didn't you think of it? Think of what? The other two wishes, she replied rapidly. We've only had the one. Was that not enough? He demanded fiercely. No, she cried triumphantly. We'll have one more. Go down and go get it, and wish our boy alive again. The man sat up in bed and flung his bedclothes from his quaking limbs. Good God, you are mad, he cried, aghast. Get it, she panted. Get it quickly, and wish. My boy, my boy. Her husband struck a match and lit the candle. Go back to bed, he said uneasily. You don't know what you are saying. We had the first wish granted, said the old woman feverishly. Why not the second? A coincidence, stammered the old man. Go and get it, and wish, cried his wife, quivering with excitement. The old man turned and regarded her, and his voice shook. He's been dead 10 days, and besides, I would not tell you else, but I could only recognize him by his clothing. If he was too terrible for you to see, then how now? Bring him back, cried the old woman, and dragged him towards the door. Do you think I fear the child I have nursed? He went down in the darkness and felt his way to the parlor, and then to the mantelpiece. The talisman was in its place, and a horrible fear that the unspoken wish might bring his mutilated son before him ere he could escape from the room seized upon him, and he caught his breath as he found that he had lost the direction of the door. His brow cold with sweat, he felt his way round the table and groped along the wall until he found himself in the small passage with the unwholesome thing in his hand. Even his wife's face seemed changed as he entered the room. It was white and expectant, and too his fears seemed to have an unnatural look upon it. He was afraid of her. Wish, she cried in a strong voice. It is foolish and wicked, he faltered. Wish, repeated his wife. He raised his hand. I wish my son alive again. The talisman fell to the floor, and he regarded it fearfully. Then he sank, trembling, into a chair as the old woman, with burning eyes, walked to the window and raised the blind. He sat until he was chilled with the cold, glancing occasionally at the figure of the old woman peering through the window. The candle end, which had burned below the rim of the china candlestick, was throwing pulsating shadows on the ceiling and walls until, with a flicker larger than the rest, it expired. The old man, with an unspeakable sense of relief at the failure of the talisman, crept back to his bed. And a minute or two afterward, the old woman came silently and apathetically beside him. Neither spoke, but lay silently listening to the ticking of the clock. A stair creaked, and a squeaky mouse scurried noisily through the wall. The darkness was oppressive, and after lying for some time screwing up his courage, he took the box of matches and, striking one, went downstairs for a candle. At the foot of the stairs the match went out, and he paused to strike another, and at the same moment a knock, so quiet and stealthy as to be scarcely audible, sounded on the front door. The matches fell from his hand and spilled in the passage. He stood motionless, his breath suspended until the knock was repeated. Then he turned and fled swiftly back to his room and closed the door behind him. A third knock sounded through the house. "What's that?" cried the old woman, starting up. "A rat," said the old man in shaking tones. "A rat. It passed me on the stairs." His wife sat up in bed, listening. A loud knock resounded through the house. "It's Herbert!" she screamed. It's Herbert!" She ran to the door, but her husband was before her and, catching her by the arm, held her tightly. "What are you going to do?" he whispered hoarsely. "It's my boy! It's Herbert!" she cried, struggling mechanically. "I forgot it was 2 miles away. What are you holding me for? Let go! I must open the door." "For God's sake, don't let it in," cried the old man, trembling. "You're afraid of your own son?" she cried, struggling. "Let me go. I'm coming, Herbert, I'm coming." There was another knock. And another. The old woman, with a sudden wrench, broke free and ran from the room. Her husband followed to the landing and called after her appealingly as she hurried downstairs. He heard the chain rattle back and the bottom bolt drawn slowly and stiffly from the socket. Then the old woman's voice, strained and panting. "The bolts!" she cried loudly. "Come down, I can't reach it." But her husband was on his hands and knees, groping wildly on the floor in search of the paw. If he could only find it before the thing outside got in. A perfect fusillade of knocks reverberated through the house, and he heard the scraping of a chair as his wife put it down in the passage against the door. He heard the creaking of the bolt as he came slowly back, and at the same moment he found the monkey's paw and frantically breathed his third and last wish. The knocking ceased suddenly, although the echoes of it were still in the house. He heard the chair drawn back, and the door opened. A cold wind rushed up the staircase, and a long, loud wail of disappointment and misery from his wife gave him courage to run down to her side and then to the gate beyond. The street lamp, flickering opposite, shone on a quiet and deserted road. The end. Ooh, that was good. Okay, isn't that like the rule of like all wishing? You can't bring people back from the dead? That's like everything. Everything in like magic is like you can't bring people back from the dead because they never come back the way that you want them to. They're like still partially dead or whatever it is. They like don't belong on this realm anymore, and like something is like tearing at them to where they're not happy. Hmm. Interesting. So, was the third wish just for him to go away? Can't make someone fall in love with you. Right. You can't wish for more wishes. Right. It's a Pet Cemetery moment. They don't care about rules. It's a monkey's paw. There's no rules when it comes to monkey's paw. I liked it. I do like it. So, okay. So now they just have this paw. So they did three wishes, but he was the third person, right? Three persons for three wishes. Or did I make that up? Was that the only rule? I love that you understand, but let me bring Pre-Bell back that, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep, free will, bringing people back from the dead, and more wishes. Those are usually like the three rules. At least that's how it is in Disney's Aladdin. Okay, let's see. We have The Well next. It's also a short story, and it was also published in the same compendium, The Lady of the Barge, because, ships. Two men stood in the billiard room of an old country house, talking. Play, which had been of a half-hearted nature, was over, and they sat at the open window, looking out over the park, stretching away beneath them, conversing idly. "Your time's nearly up, Jem," said one at length. "This time 6 weeks you'll be yawning out the honeymoon and cursing the woman, who invented them." Jem Benson stretched his long limbs in the chair and grunted in dissent. "I've never understood it," continued Wilfred Carr, yawning. "It's not in my line at all. I never had enough money for my own wants, let alone for two. Perhaps if I were as rich as you, or Croesus, I might regard it differently." There was just sufficient meaning in the latter part of the remark for his cousin to forbear to reply to it. He continued to gaze out the window and to smoke slowly. "Not as rich as Croesus, or you," resumed Carr, regarding him from beneath lowered lids. "I paddle my own canoe down the stream of time, and, tying it to my friends' doorposts, go in to eat their dinners." "Quite Venetian," said Jem Benson, still looking out the window. "It's not a bad thing for you, Wilfred, that you have the doorposts and dinners and friends." Carr grunted in his turn. "Seriously, though, Jem," he said slowly, "you're a lucky fellow, a very lucky fellow. If there's a better girl above ground than Olive, I should like to see her." "Yeah," said the other quietly. "She's such an exceptional girl," continued Carr, staring out the window. "She's so good and gentle. She thinks you're a bundle of all the virtues." He laughed frankly and joyously, but the other man did not join him. "Strong sense of right and wrong, though," continued Carr musingly. "Do you know, I believe that if she found out that you were not what?" demanded Benson, turning upon him fiercely. "Not what?" "Everything that you are," returned his cousin with a grin that belied his words. "I'd believe she'd drop you." "Talk about something else," said Benson, slowly. "Your pleasantries are not always in the best taste." Wilfred Carr rose, and taking a cue from the rack, bent over the board and practiced one or two favorite shots. "The only other subject I can talk about just at present is my own financial affairs," he said slowly, as he walked round the table. "Talk about something else," said Benson again bluntly. "And the two things are connected," said Carr, and dropping his cue, he half sat on the table and eyed his cousin. There was a long silence. Benson pitched the end of his cigar out of the window and, leaning back, closed his eyes. "Do you follow me?" inquired Carr at length. Benson opened his eyes and nodded at the window. "Do you want to follow my cigar?" he demanded. "I should prefer to depart by the usual way, for your sake," returned the other, unabashed. "If I left by window, all sorts of questions would be asked, and you know what a talkative chap I am." "So long as you don't talk about my affairs," returned the other, restraining himself by an obvious effort, "you can talk yourself hoarse." "I'm sorry for the loud car. I'm in a mess," said Carr slowly. "A devil of a mess. If I don't raise 1,500 by this day fortnight, I shall be getting my board and lodging free." "Would that be any change?" questioned Benson. "The quality would," retorted the other. "The address also would not be good. Seriously, Jem, will you let me have the 1,500? "No," said the other simply. Carr went white. It's to save me from ruin, he said thickly. I've helped you till I'm tired, said Benson, turning and regarding him. And it is all to no good. If you've got into a mess, get out of it. You should be you should not be so fond of giving autographs away. It's foolish, I admit, said Carr deliberately. I won't do so any more. By the way, I've got some to sell. You needn't sneer. They're not my own. Whose are they? Inquired the other. Yours. Benson got up from his chair and crossed over to the room. What is this? He asked quietly. Blackmail? Call it what you like, said Carr. I've got some letters for sale. Price 1,500. And I know a man who would buy them at a price for the mere chance of getting Olive from you. I'll give you first offer. If you have got any letters bearing my signature, you will be good enough to give them to me, said Benson, slowly. They're mine, said Carr lightly. Given to me by the lady you wrote them to. I must say that they are not all in the best possible taste. His cousin reached forward suddenly, and catching him by the collar of his coat, pinned him down on the table. Give me those letters, he breathed, sticking his face close to Carr. They're not here, said Carr, struggling. I'm not a fool. Let me go, or I'll raise the price. The other man raised him from the table in his powerful hands, apparently with the intention of dashing his head against it. Then, suddenly, his hold relaxed as an astonished-looking maidservant entered the room with letters. Carr sat up hastily. That's how it was done, said Benson, for the girl's benefit, as he took the letters. I don't wonder at the other man making him pay for it, then, said Carr blandly. You will give me those letters, said Benson, suggestively, as the girl left the room. At the price I mentioned. Yes, said Carr. But so sure as I am living man, if you lay your clumsy hands on me again, I'll double it. Now, I'll leave you for a time while you think it over. He took a cigar from the box and, lighting it carefully, quitted the room. His cousin waited until the door had closed behind him, and then, turning to the window, sat there in a fit of fury, as silent as it was terrible. The air was fresh and sweet from the park, heavy with the scent of new mown grass. The fragrance of a cigar was now added to it, and, glancing out, he saw his cousin pacing slowly by. He rose and went to the door, and then, apparently altering his mind, he returned to the window and watched the figure of his cousin as it moved slowly away into the moonlight. Then he rose again, and, for a long time, the room was empty. It was empty when Mrs. Benson came in some time later to say good night to her son on her way to bed. She walked slowly round the table and, pausing at the window, gazed from it in idle thought, until she saw the figure of her son advancing with rapid strides toward the house. He looked up at the window. "Good night," she said. "Good night," said Benson. "Where's Wilfred?" He's gone," said Benson. "Gone?" "We had a few words. He was wanting money again, and I gave him a piece of my mind. I don't think we'll see him in again." "Oh, poor Wilfred," said Mrs. Benson. "He is always in some sort of trouble. I hope that you were not too hard on him." "No more than he deserved," said her son sternly. "Good night." Part 2. The well, which had long ago fallen into disuse, was almost hidden by the thick tangle of undergrowth which ran riot at that corner of the old park. It was partly covered by the shrunken half of a lid, above which a rusty windlass creaked in company with the music of the pines when the wind blew strongly. The full light of the sun never reached it, and the ground surrounding it was moist and green when other parts of the park were gaping with the heat. Two people, walking slowly round the park in the fragrant stillness of a summer evening, strayed in the direction of the well. "No use going through the wilderness, Olive," said Benson, pausing on the outskirts of the pines and eyeing with some disfavor the gloom beyond. "Best part of the park," said the girl briskly. "You know it's my favorite spot." "I know you're very fond of sitting on the coping," said the man slowly, "and I wish you wouldn't. One day you will lean back too far and fall in." "And make the acquaintance of truth," said Olive lightly. "Come along." She ran from him and was lost in the shadow of the pines, the bracken crackling beneath her feet as she ran. Her companion followed slowly, and emerging from the gloom saw her poised daintily on the edge of the well with her feet hidden in the rank grass and nettles which surrounded it. She motioned her companion to take a seat by her side, and smiled softly as she felt a strong arm passed about her waist. "I like this place," she said, breaking a long silence. "It is so dismal, so uncanny. Do you know, I wouldn't dare to sit here alone, Jem. I should imagine that all sorts of dreadful things were hidden behind the bushes and trees, waiting to spring out on me. Ugh!" "You'd better let me take you in," said her companion tenderly. "The well isn't always wholesome, especially in the hot weather. Let's make a move." The girl gave an obstinate little shake and settled herself more securely on her seat. "Smoke your cigar in peace," she said quietly. "I am settled here for a quiet talk. Has anything been heard of Wilfred yet?" "Nothing." "Quite a dramatic disappearance, isn't it?" she continued. "Another scrape, I suppose, and another letter for you in the same old strain. 'Dear Jem, help me out.'" Jem Benson blew a cloud of fragrant smoke into the air, and holding his cigar between his teeth, brushed away the ash from his coat sleeves. "I wonder what he would have done without you," said the girl, pressing his arm affectionately. "Gone under long ago, I suppose. When we are married, Jem, I shall presume upon the relationship to lecture him. He's very wild, but he has his good points. Poor fellow." "I never saw them," said Benson, with startling bitterness. "God knows I never saw them." "He's nobody's enemy but his own," said the girl, startled by his outburst. "You don't know much about him," said the other sharply. "He was not above blackmail, not above ruining the life of a friend to do himself a benefit. A loafer, a cur, and a liar." The girl looked up at him soberly but timidly, and took his arm without a word, and they both sat silent, while evening deepened into night, and the beams of the moon, filtering through the branches, surrounded them with a silver network. Her head sank upon his shoulder till, suddenly, with a sharp cry, she sprang to her feet. "What was that?" she cried breathlessly. "What was what?" demanded Benson, springing up and clutching her fast by the arm. She caught her breath and tried to laugh. "You're hurting me, Jem." His hold relaxed. "What's the matter?" he asked. "What was it startled you?" "I was startled," she said, slowly putting her hands on his shoulders. "I suppose the words I used just now are ringing in my ears, but I fancied that somebody behind us whispered, 'Jem, help me out.'" "Fancy," repeated Benson, and his voice shook. "But these fancies are not good for you. You are frightened at the dark and the gloom of these trees. Let me take you back to the house." "No, I'm not frightened," said the girl, reseating herself. "I should never be really frightened of anything when were with me, Jem. I'm surprised at myself for being so silly." The man made no reply but stood, a strong, dark figure, a yard or two from the wall, as though waiting for her to join him. "Come and sit down, sir," cried Olive, patting the work with her small white hand. "One would think that you did not like your company." He obeyed, slowly, and took a seat by her side, drawing so hard at his cigar that the light of it shone upon his fare at every breath. He passed his arm, firm and rigid as steel, behind her, with his hand resting on the brickwork beyond. "Are you warm enough?" he asked, as she made a little movement. "Pretty fair," she shivered. "One oughtn't to be cold at this time of year, but there's a cold, damp air comes up from the well." As she spoke, a faint splash sound from the depths below, and for the second time that evening, she sprang from the well with a little cry of dismay. "What is it now?" he asked in a fearful voice. He stood by her side and gazed at the wall as though half expecting to see the cause of her alarm emerge from it. "My bracelet!" she cried in distress. My poor mother's bracelet! I've dropped it down the well." "Your bracelet," repeated Benson dully. "Your bracelet, the diamond one?" "The one that was my mother's," said Olive. "Oh, we can get it back, surely. We must have the water drained off." "Your bracelet," repeated Benson stupidly. "Jem," said the girl in a terrified tone. "Dear Jem, what is the matter?" For the man she loved was standing regarding her with horror. The moon which touched it was not responsible for all the whiteness of the distorted face, and she shrank back in fear to the edge of the well. He saw her fear, and by a mighty effort regained his composure and took her hand. "Poor little girl," he murmured, "you frightened me. I was not looking when you cried, and I thought that you were slipping from my arms, down. His voice broke, and the girl, throwing herself into his arms, clung to him convulsively. There, said Benson fondly. Don't cry. Don't cry." "Tomorrow," said Olive, half laughing, half crying, "we will all come round the well with hook and line and fish for it. It will be quite a new sport." "No, we must try some other way," said Benson. "You shall have it back." "How?" asked the girl. "You shall see," said Benson. "Tomorrow morning at latest you shall have it back. Till then, promise me that you will not mention your loss to anyone. Promise." "I promise," said Olive wonderingly. "But why not?" "It is of great value, for one thing, but there are many reasons. For one thing, it is my duty to get it for you." "Wouldn't you like to jump down for it?" she asked mischievously. "Listen." She stooped for a stone and dropped it down. "Fancy being where that is now," she said, peering into the blackness. "Fancy going round and round like a mouse in a pail, clutching at the slimy sides with the water filling your mouth, and looking up at the little patch of sky above." "You had better come in," said Benson very quietly. "You're developing a taste for the morbid and horrible." The girl turned and, taking his arm, walked slowly in the direction of the house. Mrs. Benson, who was sitting on the porch, rose to receive them. "Oh, you shouldn't have kept her out so long," she said chidingly. "Where have you been?" "Sitting at the well," said Olive, smiling, "discussing our future." "I don't believe that place is healthy," said Mrs. Benson emphatically. "I really think it might be filled in, Jem." "All right," said her son slowly. "Pity it wasn't filled in long ago." He took the chair vacated by his mother, and she entered the house with Olive, and with his hands hanging limply over the sides, sat in deep thought. After a time he rose, and going upstairs to a room which was set apart for sporting requisites, selected a sea fishing line and some hooks, and stole softly downstairs again. He walked swiftly across the park in the direction of the well, turning before he entered the shadow of the trees to look back at the lighted window of the house. Then, having arranged his line, he sat on the edge of the well and cautiously lowered it. He sat with his lips compressed, occasionally looking about him in a startled fashion, as though he half expected to see something peering at him from the belt of trees. Time after time, he lowered his line until at length, in pulling it up, he heard a little metallic tinkle against the sides of the well. He held his breath again and, forgetting his fears, drew the line in inch by inch so as not to lose its precious burden. His pulse beat rapidly, and his eyes were bright. As the line came slowly in, he saw the catch hanging on the hook, and with a steady hand drew the last few feet in. Then he saw that instead of the bracelet he had hooked a bunch of keys. With a faint cry, he shook them from the hook into the water below and stood breathing heavily. Not a sound broke the stillness of the night. He walked up and down a bit and stretched his great muscles. Then he came back to the well and resumed his task. For an hour or more, the line was lowered without result. In his eagerness, he forgot his fears, and with eyes bent down, the well fished slowly and carefully. Twice the hook became entangled in something and was with difficulty released. It caught a third time, and all his efforts failed to free it. Then he dropped the line down the well and with head bent walked toward the house. He went first to the stables at the rear, and then retiring to his room for some time, paced restlessly up and down. Then, without removing his clothes, he flung himself upon the bed and fell into a troubled sleep. Part 3. Long before anybody else was astir, he arose and stole softly downstairs. The sunlight was stealing in at every crevice and flashing in long streaks across the darkened rooms. The dining room into which he looked struck chill and cheerless in the dark yellow light which came through the lowered blinds. He remembered that it had the same appearance when his father lay dead in the house. Now, as then, everything seemed ghastly and unreal. The very chairs standing as their occupants had left them the night before seemed to be indulging in some dark communication of ideas. Slowly and noiselessly, he opened the hall door and passed into the fragrant air beyond. The sun was shining on the drenched grass and trees, and a slowly vanishing white mist rolled like smoke from the grounds. After a moment he stood. For a moment he stood, breathing deeply the sweet air of the morning, and then walked slowly in the direction of the stables. The rusty creaking of a pump handle and a spatter of water upon the red-tiled courtyard showed that somebody else was astir. And a few steps farther, he beheld a brawny, sandy-haired man gasping wildly under the severe self-infliction at the pump. "Everything ready, George?" he asked quietly. "Yes, sir," said the man, straightening up suddenly and touching his forehead. "Bob's just finishing the arrangements inside. It's a lovely morning for a dip. The water in that well must be just icy." "Be as quick as you can," said Benson impatiently. "Very good, sir," said George, burnishing his face harshly with a very small towel which had been hanging over the top of the pump. "Hurry up, Bob." In answer to his summons, a man appeared at the door of the stable with a coil of stout rope over his arm and a large metal candlestick in his hand. "Just to try the air, sir," said George, following the master's glance. "A well gets rather foul sometimes, but if a candle can live down it, a man can." His master nodded, and the man, hastily pulling up the neck of his shirt and thrusting his arms into his coat, followed him as he led the way slowly to the well. "Beg pardon, sir," said George, drawing up his side, "but you are not looking over and above well this morning. If you'll let me go down, I'd enjoy the bath." No, said Benson peremptorily. You ain't fit to go down, sir, persisted his follower. I've never seen you look so before. Now, if mind your business, said his master curtly. George became silent, and the three walked with swinging strides through the long, wet grass to the well. Bob flung the rope on the ground, and at a sign from his master handed him the candlestick. Here's the line for it, sir, said Bob, fumbling in his pockets. Benson took it up from him and slowly tied it to the candlestick. Then he placed it on the edge of the well and, striking a match, lit the candle and began slowly to lower it. Hold on, sir, said George quickly, laying his hand on his arm. You must tilt it or the string'll burn through. Even as he spoke, the string parted and the candlestick fell into the water below. Benson swore quietly. I'll get you another one, said George, starting up. Never mind, the well's all right. Well, it won't take but a minute, said the other over his shoulder. Are you master here, or am I? Said Benson hoarsely. George came back slowly, a glance at his master's face, stopping the protest upon his tongue, and he stood by watching him sulkily as he sat on the well and removed his outer garments. Both men watched him curiously, as having completed his preparations, he stood grim and silent with his hands by his sides. I wish you'd let me go, sir, said George, plucking up the courage to address him. You ain't fit to go. You've got a chill or something. I shouldn't wonder it's the typhoid. They've got it in the village bad. For a moment, Benson looked at him angrily. Then his gaze softened. Not this time, George, he said quietly. He took the looped end of the rope and placed it under his arms, and sitting down, threw one leg over the side of the well. How are you going about, sir? Queried George, laying hold of the rope and signing to Bob to do the same. I'll call out when I reach the water, said Benson. Then pay out 3 yards more quickly so that I can get to the bottom. Very good, sir, they both answered. Their master threw the leg over the coping and sat motionless. His back was turned toward the men as he sat with his head bent, looking down the shaft. He sat for so long that George became uneasy. All right, sir? He inquired. Yes, said Benson slowly. If I tug at the rope, George, pull up at once. Lower away. The rope passed steadily through their hands until a hollow cry from the darkness below and a faint splashing warned them that he had reached the water. They gave him 3 yards more and stood with relaxed grasp and strained ears, waiting. He's gone under, said Bob in a low voice. The other nodded, and moistening his huge palms took a firmer grip of the rope. Fully a minute passed, and the men began to exchange uneasy glances. Then a sudden tremendous jerk, followed by a series of feebler ones, nearly tore the rope from their grasp. Pull! Shouted George, placing one foot on the side and hauling desperately. Pull! Pull! He's stuck fast! He's not coming! Pull! In response to their terrific exertions, the rope came slowly in, inch by inch, until at length a violent splashing was heard. And at the same moment, a scream of unutterable horror came echoing up the shaft. What a weight he is, panted Bob. He's stuck fast or something. Keep still, sir. For heaven's sake, keep still. For the taut rope was being jerked violently by the struggles of the weight at the end of it. Both men, with grunting and sighs, hauled it in foot by foot. All right, sir, cried George cheerfully. He had one foot against the well and was pulling manfully. The burden was nearing the top. A long and a strong pull, and the face of a dead man, with mud in the eyes and nostrils, came peering over the edge. Behind it was the ghastly face of his master. But this he saw too late. For with a great cry he let go his hold of the rope and stepped back. The suddenness overthrew his assistant, and the rope tore through his hands. There was a frightful splash. You fool, stammered Bob, and ran to the well helplessly. Run, cried George. Run for another line. He bent over the coping. and called eagerly down as his assistant sped back to the stables, shouting wildly. His voice re-echoed down the shaft, but all else was silent. The end. Ooh, okay. Okay, so we have these friend cousins, and one of them is cheating on his girl, and the other one is blackmailing him because he has money problems. And then his friend gets rid of him. And then the girl drops, loses her bracelet down this well, and then he goes down there, and then they're scared when they pull him back up, and they drop him. Oops. Oops, no protagonists. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. That was a good one. That was fun. That was fun. I liked it. Monkey's Paw, better. But I did like this one as well. We have one more story tonight. Let's do it. Let's do it. Jerry Bundler. Okay, Jerry Bundler. Published in 1914. It wanted a few nights to Christmas, a festival for which the small market town of Torchester was making extensive preparations. The narrow streets, which had been thronged with people, were now almost deserted. The Cheap Jack from London, with a remnant of breath left after his evening's exertions, was making feeble attempts to blow out his naphtha? Naphtha? His lamp. To blow out his lamp. And the last shops open were rapidly closing for the night. In the comfortable coffee room of the old Boar's Head, half a dozen guests, principally commercial travelers, sat talking by the light of the fire. The talk had drifted from trade to politics, from politics to religion, and so by easy stages to the supernatural. 3 ghost stories, never known to fail before, had fallen flat. There was too much noise outside, too much light within. The 4th story was told by an old hand with more success. The streets were quiet, and he had turned the gas out. In the flickering light of the fire, as it shone on the glasses and danced with shadows on the walls, the story proved so enthralling that George, the waiter, whose presence had been forgotten, created a very disagreeable sensation by suddenly starting up from a dark corner and gliding silently from the room. "That's what I call a good story," said one of the men, sipping his hot whiskey. "Of course, it's an old idea that spirits like to get into the company of human beings. A man told me once that he traveled down the Great Western with a ghost and hadn't the slightest suspicion of it until the inspector came for tickets. My friend said the way that ghost tried to keep up appearances by feeling for it in all of its pockets and looking on the floor was quite touching. Ultimately, it gave up and, with a faint groan, vanished through the ventilator." "That'll do, Hurst," said another man. "It's not a subject for jesting," said a little old gentleman who had been an attentive listener. "I've never seen an apparition myself, but I know people who have, and I consider that they form a very interesting link between us and the afterlife. There's a ghost story connected with this house, you know." "Never heard it," said another speaker, "and I've been here some years now." "Oh, it dates back a long time now," said the old gentleman. "You've heard about Jerry Bundler, George?" "Well, I just heard odds and ends, sir," said the old waiter, "but I never put much count to 'em. There was one chap here that said he saw it, and the governor sacked him prompt." "My father was a native of this town," said the old gentleman, "and knew the story well. He was a truthful man and a steady churchgoer, but I've heard him declare that once in his life he saw the appearance of Jerry Bundler in this house." "Who's Jerry Bundler?" inquired a voice. A London thief, a pickpocket, a highwayman, anything he could turn his dishonest hand to, replied the old gentleman. And he was run to earth in this house one Christmas week 80 years ago. He took his last supper in this very room after he had gone up to a bed a couple of Bow Street runners, who had followed him from London but lost the scent of it, went upstairs with the landlord and tried the door. It was stout oak and fast, so one went into the yard and by means of a short ladder got onto the window sill, while the other stayed outside the door. Those below in the yard saw the man crouching on the sill. And then there was a sudden smash of glass, and with a cry he fell in a heap of the stones at their feet. Then the moonlight they saw the white face of the pickpocket peeping over the sill, and while some stayed in the yard, others ran into the house and helped the other men to break the door in. It was difficult to obtain an entrance, even then, for it was barred with heavy furniture, but they got in at last, and the first thing that met their eyes was the body of Jerry, dangling from the top of the bed of his own handkerchief. Which bedroom was it? Asked 2 or 3 voices together. The narrator shook his head. That I can't tell you. But the story goes that Jerry still haunts this house. And my father used to declare positively that the last time he slept here, the ghost of Jerry Bundler lowered himself into the top of his head and tried to strangle him. That'll do, said an uneasy voice. I wish you'd thought to ask your father which bedroom it was. What for? Inquired the old gentleman. Well, I should take care not to sleep in it, that's all, said the voice shortly. There's nothing to fear, said the other. I don't believe for a moment that ghosts could really hurt one. In fact, my father used to confess that it was only the unpleasantness of the thing that upset him, and that for all practical purposes, Jerry's fingers might have been made of cotton wool for all that harm they could do. That's all very fine, said the last speaker again. A ghost story is a ghost story, sir, but when a gentleman tells a tale of a ghost in the house in which one is going to sleep, I call it most ungentlemanly. Oh, nonsense, said the old gentleman, rising. Ghosts can't hurt you. For my own part, I should rather like to see one. Good night, gentlemen. Good night, said the others. And I only hope Jerry'll pay you a visit, added the nervous man as the door closed. Bring some more whiskey, George, said a stout commercial. I want keeping up when the talk turns this way. Shall I light the gas, Mr. Malcolm? Said George. No, the fire's very uncomfortable, said the traveler. Now, gentlemen, any of you know any more? I think we've had enough, said another man. We shall be thinking we see spirits next, and we're not all like the old gentleman who's just gone. Humbug, said Hurst. I should like to put him to the test. Suppose I dress up as Jerry Bundler and go and give him a chance of displaying his courage. Bravo, said Malcolm huskily, drowning 1 or 2 faint no's. Just for the jokes, gentlemen. No, drop it, Hurst. Only for the jokes, said Hurst somewhat eagerly. I've got some things upstairs which I'm going to play in the rivals, knee breeches, buckles, all that sort of thing. It's a rare chance. If you'll wait a bit, I'll give you a full dress rehearsal entitled Jerry Bundler or The Nocturnal Strangler. You won't frighten us, said the commercial with a husky laugh. Well, I know that, said Jerry sharply. It's a question of acting, that's all. I'm pretty good, ain't I, Summers? You're all right. For an amateur, said his friend with a laugh. I'll bet you a level sov. You don't frighten me, said the stout traveler. Done, said Hurst. I'll take the bet to frighten you first and the old gentleman afterwards. These gentlemen shall be the judges. You won't frighten us, sir, said another man, because we're prepared for you. But you'd better leave the old man alone. It's dangerous play. I'll try you first, said Hurst, springing up. No gas, mind. He ran lightly upstairs to his room, leaving the others, and most of whom had been drinking somewhat freely, to wrangle about his proceedings. It ended in two of them going to bed. "He's crazy on acting," said Summers, lighting his pipe. "Thinks he's equal to somebody, to anybody almost. It doesn't matter with us, but I won't let him go to the old man. And he won't mind so long as he gets an opportunity of acting to us." "Well, I hope he'll hurry up," said Malcolm, yawning. "It's after 12 now." Nearly half an hour passed. Malcolm drew his watch from his pocket and was busy winding it when George, the waiter, who had been sent on an errand to the bar, burst suddenly into the room and rushed forwards. "He's coming, gentlemen," he said breathlessly. "Why, you're frightened, George," said the stout commercial with a chuckle. "It was the suddenness of it," said George sheepishly. And besides, I didn't look for seeing him in the bar. There's only a glimmer of light here, and he was standing on the floor behind the bar. I'd nearly trod on him." "Oh, you'll never make a man, George," said Malcolm. "Well, he took me unawares," said the waiter. "Not that I have gone to the bar by myself, and I've known that he was there, but I don't believe you would either, sir." "Nonsense," said Malcolm. "I'll go fetch him." "You don't know what it's like, sir," said George, catching him by the sleeve. "It ain't fit to look at by yourself. It ain't indeed. It's got the... What's that?" They all started at the sound of a smothered cry from the staircase and the sound of somebody running hurriedly along the passage. Before anybody could speak, the door flew open and a figure bursting into the room flung itself gasping and shivering upon them. "What is it? What's the matter?" demanded Malcolm. "What? It's Mr. Hurst." He shook him roughly, and then held some spirit to his lips. Hurst drank it greedily, and, with a sharp intake of his breath, gripped him by the arm. "Light the gas, George," said Malcolm. The waiter obeyed hastily. Hurst, a ludicrous but pitiable figure in knee breeches and coat, a large wig all awry and his face a mess of grease paint, clung to him, trembling. "Now what's the matter?" "I've seen it," said Hurst with a hysterical sob. "Oh, Lord, I'll never play the fool again, never." "Seen what?" "Him. It. The ghost. Anything," said Hurst wildly. "Rot," said Malcolm uneasily. I was coming down the stairs," said Hurst, "just capering down, as I thought it ought to do, and I felt a tap." He broke off suddenly and peered nervously through the open door into the passage. "I thought I saw it again," he whispered. "Look, uh, at the foot of the stairs. Can you see anything?" "No, there's nothing there," said Malcolm, whose own voice shook a little. Go on. You felt a tap on your shoulder?" I I turned round and saw it. A little wicked head and a white dead face. "That's what I saw in the bar," said George. "'Orrid it was. Devilish." Erst shuddered, and still retaining his nervous grip of Malcolm's sleeve, dropped into a chair. "Well, it's a most unaccountable thing," said the dumbfounded Malcolm, turning round to the others. "It's the last time I come to this house." "I leave tomorrow," said George. "I wouldn't go down to that bar again by myself. No, not for £50. "It's talking about the thing that's caused it, I expect," said one of the men. "We've all been talking about this and having it in our minds. Practically, we've been forming a spiritualistic circle without knowing it." "Hang on, gentlemen," said Malcolm heartily. "Upon my soul, I'm half afraid to go to bed. It's odd they should both think that they saw something." "I saw it as plain as I see you, sir," said George solemnly. "Perhaps if you keep your eyes turned up in the passage, you'll see it for yourself." They followed the direction of his finger, but saw nothing, although one of them fancied that the head peeped round the corner of the wall. "Who'll come down the bar?" said Malcolm, looking round. "You can go, if you like," said one of the others with a faint laugh. "We'll wait here for you." The stout traveler walked towards the door and took a few steps up the passage. Then he stopped. All was quiet. And he walked slowly to the end and looked down fearfully towards the glass partition which shut off the bar. 3 times he made as though to go to it. Then he turned back and, glancing over his shoulder, came hurriedly back to the room. "Did you see it, sir?" whispered George. "Don't know," said Malcolm shortly. "I fancied I saw something, but it might have been fancy. I'm in the mood to see something, anything, just now, but how are you feeling, sir?" "Well, feel a bit better now," said Hurst somewhat brusquely, as all eyes were turned upon him. "I dare say you think I'm easily scared, but you didn't see it." "Not at all," said Malcolm, smiling faintly despite himself. "I'm going to bed," said Hurst, noticing the smile and resenting it. "Will you share my room with me, Summers?" "I will with pleasure," said his friend, "provided you don't mind sleeping with the gas on full all night." He rose from his seat and, bidding the company a friendly good night, left the room with his crestfallen friend. The others saw them to the foot of the stairs and, having heard their door close, returned to the coffee room. "Well, I suppose the bet's off," said the stout commercial, poking the fire and then standing with his legs apart on the hearthrug. "Though, as far as I can see, I won it. I never saw a man so scared in all my life. Sort of poetic justice about it, isn't it?" "Never mind about poetry or justice," said one of the listeners. "Who's going to sleep with me?" "I will," said Malcolm, affably. "And I suppose we share a room together, Mr. Leake?" said the third man, turning to the fourth. "No, thank you," said the other briskly. "I don't believe in ghosts. If anything comes into my room, I'll shoot it." "That won't hurt a spirit, Leake," said Malcolm decisively. "Well, the noise'll be like company to me," said Leake, "and it'll wake the house too. But if you're nervous, sir," he added with a grin to the man who had suggested sharing his room, "George'll be only too pleased to sleep on the doormat inside your room. I know." "That I will, sir," said George fervently. "And if you gentlemen would only come down with me to the bar to put the gas out, I could never be sufficiently grateful." They went out in a body, and with the exception of Leake, peering carefully before them as they went. George turned the light out in the bar, and they returned unmolested to the coffee room, and, avoiding the sardonic smile of Leake, prepared to separate for the night. "Give me the candle while you put the gas out, George," said the traveler. The waiter handed it to him and extinguished the gas, and at the same moment all distinctly heard a step in the passage outside. It stopped at the door, and as they watched with bated breath, the door creaked and slowly opened. Malcolm fell back open-mouthed as a white, leering face with sunken eyeballs and close-cropped bullet head appeared at the opening. For a few seconds, the creature stood regarding them, blinking in a strange fashion at the candle. Then, with a sidling movement, it came a little way into the room and stood there as if bewildered. Not a man spoke or moved, but all watched with a horrible fascination as the creature moved its dirty neckcloth and its head rolled on its shoulder. For a minute it paused, and then, holding the rag before it, moved towards Malcolm. The candle went out suddenly with a flash and a bang. There was a smell of powder and something writhing in the darkness on the floor, and a faint, choking cough, and then silence. Malcolm was the first to speak. "Matches," he said, in a strange voice. George struck one. Then he leapt at the gas, and a burner flamed from the match. Malcolm touched the thing on the floor with his foot and found it soft. He looked at his companions. They mouthed inquiries at him, but he shook his head. He lit the candle and, kneeling down, examined the silent thing on the floor. Then he rose swiftly, and dipping his handkerchief into the water jug, bent down again, grimly wiped the white face. Then he sprang back with a cry of incredulous horror, pointing at it. Leake's pistol fell to the floor, and he shut out the sight of his hands, but the others crowding forward, gazed spellbound at the dead face of Hurst. Before a word was spoken, the door opened and Summers hastily entered the room. His eyes fell on the floor. "Good God," he cried. You didn't..." Nobody spoke. "I told him not to," he said in a suffocating voice. "I told him not to. I told him not to. I told him not to. I told him." He leaned against the wall, deathly sick, put his arms out feebly, and fell fainting into the traveler's arms. Oh, the end. Crazy. Okay, I liked this one too. This was a good one. This one reminded me of the one that we've read before, The Toll House. That's it. He mostly, so it's interesting that Jacobs is known for horror, but also known for like comedy, which I literally say this all the time, but horror and comedy are the hardest genres, the hardest things to input into your stories because it is hard to get somebody to feel like terror or dread or whatever it is through just them writing it, just through people reading, versus like seeing something like a movie or a show. And then also like humor, because you don't have like timing or inflection, like you don't know like how people are saying things, or like slapstick, like yeah, you can describe slapstick, but like what? What? All right, folks. Thanks. It was a pleasure. As always, whether you lurk, whether you chat, I 1000% appreciate you, and I 1000% appreciate your support. If I do not see you next time, I hope to see you very soon.